Hare Krishna devotees. Welcome all for the um, ISKCON evening session with His Grace Sankirtana Prabhu. So, thank you, Malati Prabhu, for joining with us and introducing Prabhu for us to this program. And this program, we every Monday we're trying to accommodate one of the Prabhupada's disciples who was living with us, and then being here, we doesn't know much about them. So we want to hear about their experience and interactions with the Srila Prabhupada. And today we have Sankirtan Prabhu in our to enlighten us about Srila Prabhupada's mission and his dealings with Prabhupada and interactions in various ways. And Sankirtana Prabhu is one of the senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he is living in New Vrindavan community for the last 45 years. And his main topic today will be like my journey with Mahabharata. And Prabhu is very inspiring in a published author, and is a very received several awards, including a West Virginia First Artist Fellowship Award, Storytelling World Resource Award, and a New Generation Indie Book Award. And he is one of the artists in West Virginia and a very renowned person. And he is very professional in storytelling in schools, libraries, colleges, conferences, and etc. And it's very fortunate for us to have his association today and to learn about him and Srila Prabhupada more, and so that we'll also get inspired in this path and get move into our Krishna consciousness more into more. And with that, I'll just want to welcome Sankirtan Prabhu. Please take over from here. And thank you, Malati Prabhu, again for coming in and organizing this. Thank you very much.
It's actually my pleasure to do this service.
Hare Krishna.
So thank you so much for your kind introduction. Actually, if anyone has any burning questions, please don't hesitate to ask them now or anytime during our discussion together. I always like to keep it as a conversation. I don't want to give a lecture, but I'd like to keep it as a conversation. But my theme is my journey with Mahabharata, because in college, it was almost about the same time I met the devotees and that I discovered a Mahabharata in the college library. I went to a city college in New York City, and I was living in Manhattan on the Lower East Side, where all of the hippies lived. So I wasn't very far from 26 Second Avenue. But at that time, I had no great interest in the spiritual life. But a friend of mine at college, she said, oh, there's a new group not very far from where you live. Why don't you go there and bring me back? I want to find out about them. They must have something, some literature. And so I went there, not on my behalf, but on my friend's behalf in college. And I got some of the magazines. At that time, they were just printing them. And so that was my initial exposure. But a year later, I was majoring in college both in drama and in filmmaking. And so a year later, in 1969, I think, then in one of my courses, they were suggesting that I do a little documentary. So I thought, I saw the devotees here and there, and I thought, well, these people are pretty photogenic. Let me do something on them. And so, like I said, at the same time, I had gotten a book out of the library in my college on stories from ancient India. It was probably printed in 1910, and it had different stories from the literatures of ancient India. And one of the stories that I was very attracted to was the story of Yudhisthira and the dog. They had that. And so for my theater project, we were getting together 4 short plays for our theater program to take around to the local elementary schools. And so I thought, well, I'll write a little script about this story of Yudhishthira and the dog. And we've included that. That was one of the 4 little plays that we performed. The whole program was about an hour long. Each play was maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And so this was one of the plays that we included. But I didn't make a connection yet that the Mahabharata had something to do with the Hare Krishna people. I knew that they were both originated in India, but that's about it. And so initially, my real substantial contact with the devotees came, like I said, a year later in 1969, when I was asked in my filmmaking class to do a little documentary. So I went back down to 2nd Avenue. At that time, I saw that the 26th 2nd Avenue was closed. And I was thinking, what happened to the Hare Krishna people? But there was a small sign there saying, oh, they just moved 2 blocks away to 61 2nd Avenue. So I went there. And actually, my wife and I, we met in college, and she was majoring in sociology. And so she also decided to join me. And she was thinking, I'll do a paper in my sociology class on what type of people join this Hare Krishna. And so we began visiting the temple, and I was also going out with the devotees when they were going out chanting on 5th Avenue and in the East Village. And I was filming them, and I was filming the people around them and the reactions. And in those days, it was just remarkable to see the reactions of just ordinary people to the Hare Krishna devotees doing Sankirtana. People were just amazed. They were shocked. And so I took some footage. The thing is, I never really, I showed the footage for my film class, unedited. And then when I later on, a couple of years later, when I began to join the temple, I gave the footage to Yadubha, got a hold of it. But they've never shown the footage because, I was a hippie at that time. And it was very strange. The footage was in all sorts of strange angles. Like I was on the ground shooting up at the devotees, so shooting in different angles like this. So it was almost unusable for any type of introduction or documentary about the Hare Krishnas. But anyways, at that time when my wife and I were going to the temple, there's some things that happen that there's an exchange. There's some sort of an exchange that you find remarkable. Because like I told you, I wasn't so much spiritually inclined. I wasn't really interested in the philosophy. And I had been in touch with some in Buddhist circles, and I was kind of like leaning toward Buddhism. So I wasn't really that much inclined in the Vaishnava tradition, the Hare Krishna tradition. But then one day when my wife and I were at the temple and we were interviewing a devotee, I think it may have been Jayadvaita Swami. At that time, he was a brahmachari. And as we were speaking, we were sitting on the floor, as we were speaking, then another devotee came in, and he was arriving from Boston, and they hadn't seen each other in quite a while. And so immediately when they saw each other, they fell flat on the ground, dandavats, and then they jumped up and embraced each other. And so this simple act of the devotees kind of just honoring each other it meant so much more to me. I've never seen anything like this. It meant so much more to me than any of the philosophy that I heard. And I thought, oh, this is an exceptional thing, how they are getting together and they're falling on the floor to honor each other and they're warmly embracing each other. So I would, like I said, this, something happens where you get an attraction for Krishna consciousness. And this was my initial attraction for the devotees. And later on, my wife and I, after we graduated from college, we went up to Nova Scotia and lived up there for some time, almost a year. And we, after a year, then we hitchhiked across Canada. I was invited to come to Madison, Wisconsin, to join a theater group in Madison. And so we were making our way across Canada, hitchhiking. We stopped at the Montreal Temple. We had become vegetarians at that time. We stopped our drugs. We're chanting Hare Krishna on the Japamala. And so we stopped at Montreal. And then a couple of days later, we arrived in Toronto. We stopped there. And the devotees, actually, they were very joyous. They were saying, you're so fortunate. In a few days, Prabhupada is going to come to Detroit. And we're all going down to see him. Why don't you stick around here at the temple? You could do some service, and then we'll take you down to see Prabhupada when he comes to Detroit. So I thought, well, this is our great fortune to meet Srila Prabhupada. And at that time, there was one car. Prabhupada was coming in on Saturday. But one thing I wanted to mention, this is a kind of another thing that happened to kind of boost my attraction to Krishna consciousness. I mentioned that I was chanting at that time Japamala. I don't think I was doing 16 rounds, but I was chanting whatever I could. And here in the Toronto temple, I had never experienced this before, but they had a full-fledged altar, very beautiful altar. And they were so meticulous in maintaining the altar. They spend so much time. They're getting flowers. They're decorating the altar with beautiful flowers and making flower garlands from the fresh flowers. And so I'm chanting japa in the morning, and I see the devotees there running back and forth behind the altar. They're going back there carrying vases and carrying flowers and this and that and the other. And I was thinking to myself, this is very strange. Why are they spending so much time decorating the altar? Can't they use their time more effectively in something else? And then I began to be very critical of the devotees. I stopped my japa and just in my mind became critical of this activity of the deity worship and why they spending so much time with the deities. And all of a sudden, in my criticism, in my mind, there's a voice that cut right through the criticism. I'll never forget it. It was Prabhupada's voice, because I was already listening to Prabhupada's tapes. But he said, just chant Hare Krishna, you fool, and then you'll understand everything. And it was so shocking that I immediately began to chant again, and I dismissed my criticism of the devotees. But then there was one vehicle going on Friday evening to Detroit. Another vehicle was leaving Saturday morning. And so one of the devotees said, why don't you catch that vehicle Friday night? And so my wife and I, we were traveling with knapsacks, and we loaded up our knapsack. We went down to the car, and the devotees, they were all sitting there and said, oh, there's no room. Don't worry, just catch the vehicle on Saturday morning, no problem at all. You'll surely get there in time. So we spent another night at the Toronto temple, and the next morning again, we came down with our knapsack. We each had our own knapsack. So anyways, once again, lo and behold, the vehicle was full and we were totally despondent. We were very forlorn. And the devotees saw how shocked and forlorn that we spent 3 days waiting for a ride to see Prabhupada in Detroit. And now, Friday night, we couldn't get on, and now we couldn't get on. So the driver, he said, squeeze in and I'll take you to the highway. You've been hitchhiking across Canada all this time. It's very simple for you to hitchhike. It's only a 4-hour drive. So Prabhupada was coming in about 4 or 5 hours. And so we got, we squeezed in with our knapsacks, holding our knapsacks in our lap and squeezing as tightly as we could. Then they dropped us on the highway. And my wife and I were thinking, well, what are we going to do now? We were thinking, we're from New York City. That's a big city. We hate big cities. They're so nasty, so dirty. Do we really want to go to Detroit? So there's a conversation that we're having right on the highway. And we take out the map and look at the map to see where else we could go. And there was one town way above the Great Lakes in Canada called Sault Ste. Marie. And I thought, hey, that's a pretty interesting sounding name, Sault Ste. Marie. And it's above the Great Lakes. Why don't we just go up there? And we were talking about our different options. And somehow or other, between the two of us, we actually realized, wait a minute, what's happening now is a test to see how determined we are to go and get darshan of Srila Prabhupada. And so we came to this conclusion. I don't know who prompted the whole thing, probably my wife. She's much more devotional than I am. And so we thought, okay, we're going to Detroit. And as soon as we made that decision, we stuck out our thumb on the highway to catch a ride. And the very first car that goes by comes to a screeching halt. It stops. And so at that time, we get in and he's going to Detroit. He drops us off near the temple. And we get to the temple and there's a hubbub of activity going on. In those days when Prabhupada was coming to the temple, there was such a frenzy of activity. People were decorating, painting, scrubbing the floors. They wanted to make the best impression for Srila Prabhupada. And so everyone was so busy. We came in, devotees were running here and there. The paint was drying on the walls. And so Prabhupada hadn't shown up yet. We thought surely Prabhupada would be there by now. But here's another thing that really also helped us in our faith in Krishna consciousness. It wasn't actually Prabhupada so much, but just like we saw how the devotees, when they paid dandavats in the New York temple, here's another little thing that happened to help us increase our faith in this tradition and in the philosophy, that one of the devotees, even though we were so, and we knew how important Prabhupada was to the devotees. And we knew that they were at every spare moment, right at that point, they were using to get prepared for Prabhupada. But there was one devotee, his name is Govardhan, and he saw us and that we were a little confused and, people are running here and there at the temple. And so he stopped what he was doing and he sat us down made us comfortable. He said, I'll be right back. He brought 2 nice plates of prasadam, and he sat down with us and he talked with us for a few moments. And this made such another great impact, that the kindness of the devotees, that they're taking their time from serving Prabhupada to attend to us. This also was a very profound moment. And then eventually Prabhupada came shortly after we finished the prasadam, and we had a great opportunity. This is the first time we saw him in 1971 in Detroit. And then the following day, again, he gave a talk in the morning. And then we continued and went to Madison, Wisconsin after that. So we felt a great blessing to have seen Srila Prabhupada at that time. And when we got to Madison, Wisconsin, we continued our japa mala. And a few months later, there's a devotee couple that come there to Madison to open up a temple. And they're there. They're very successful. Within a few short months, they made about a half a dozen devotees moved into the temple. And but somehow or other, they were a little bit restless. And so they left after about 6 months. But there was people who were interested. And so my wife and I, after the devotees closed down the temple, then we continued having the Sunday feast program at our apartment. And so this is how we gradually became involved in Krishna consciousness. And in 1973, then we moved to Chicago Temple and joined the devotees there in 1973. Although in 1972, I also went down to the Chicago Temple to join the devotees. They were making a pilgrimage to New Vrindavan. So this is the first time that I came here in 1972 for Janmashtami. And I went down to Chicago, and the devotees invited me to join them. And I was here in New Vrindavan at that time for 3 days. And so one of the things that the devotees had me do was that there was a house. Actually, it's not right across the street from where I am today. There was a house here. It's no longer here, but it was an old house, and they were preparing that place for Prabhupada to stay in that place while he was here in New Vrindavan. And so they asked me, and so a few other guests, to come and to straighten up around the house. And in the back of the house, they were pounding away, and they were building a shower stall for Prabhupada in the back of the house, because the bathroom facilities were not the greatest in that house. And so anyways, I was straightening up with a few other guests, 2 or 3 other guests. And finally, Prabhupada and his entourage pull up, and they get out. There's all these sannyasis, big guns, and maybe a dozen sannyasis, and Srila Prabhupada, and we fall on the ground and offer our obeisances. And so I'm not a devotee at that time. I'm living outside the temple. So they go inside the door on the side of the house. And there, Prabhupada, it's his little reception room. And so he's speaking with mostly, there's probably just mostly sannyasis. Kirtananda, who was the founder and the leader of New Vrindavan, was also there. And me and a couple of other people, we were hovering outside the door, trying to listen, trying to get whatever little mercy that Prabhupada is giving out. And so no one invites us in. We're outside the door. But who would invite us in? Srila Prabhupada. He sees us, and he beckons that we come in and sit down. And so this is another mind-boggling thing, that none of the devotees thought of inviting us in, but Srila Prabhupada. He's so what is called inclusive. You know, sometimes there's an idea of exclusive. Oh, it's not for everybody. But Prabhupada's mood is inclusive. He wants everyone to embrace this Krishna consciousness. And so he invited us in. And so at that time, and I always mention it to guests, because Prabhupada himself at that time, he said that this new Vrindavan is non-different than Vrindavan in India. And anyone who comes to New Vrindavan, who visits here, they'll get the same blessing as having gone to Vrindavan in India. And as Prabhupada was talking, they brought him it's like a chalice, a beautiful chalice with water. And so he took a sip, and as he was speaking, he took his bead bag. You know, let's say this is the chalice of water, and he put his bead bag on top of the cup of water. So, because, you know, at that time, New Vrindavan is a dusty place. The roads were all dusty. And so it's just kind of a inconsequential movement, a gesture that Prabhupada covers his water, so it won't get so dusty. And so it was a great pleasure in 1971 and 1972 to see how Prabhupada, the gestures that he makes and whatever he does, he is so conscientious about whatever he does. Whatever little gesture he makes, what is just with full attention, with full consciousness, whatever he's doing. So this was a great delight and a pleasure to watch Prabhupada just make a little gesture, because he's doing it in full consciousness. And so then I went back to Madison, Wisconsin with the kind of a renewed inspiration. And we, like I said, at that time, the other devotees, even though they were very successful, they made about 5 or 6 devotees in those days within the course of 5 or 6 months. But they decided to move on. And then we had the Sunday feast program at our apartment. But did anybody have any thoughts or comments? Any questions? My talk is supposed to be about Mahabharata. So let me get back to the Mahabharata, because before I joined, I was involved in the theater in Madison, Wisconsin. I majored in theater in college. And so now that my wife and we moved to the Chicago temple, we thought that we would have to sever all of our interests and all of our connections. So even though I had a strong connection to drama and to the theater, when I joined the temple in Chicago, I was resolved to give it up. And then my wife and I, after several years in Chicago, we decided to move to New Vrindavan because we heard that they had a school. We didn't want to send our children away by themselves. We were very attached, and we wanted to keep an eye on our kids. So we moved we moved to New Vrindavan, and eventually, actually, my wife was asked to be a teacher, and she's been teaching here in New Vrindavan for over 40 years. And after being here in New Vrindavan for a couple of years, I realized, in the temples, in the city temples, mostly you're going out and distributing books, like I did in Chicago at the O'Hare Airport. or they're going out on chanting, doing Sankirtana on the streets of the big cities. But here was a community, and there were all sorts of different types of activities going on in the community. So I thought to myself, what can I really do to contribute to the Krishna conscious society? What can I really do? I was thinking, well, they have a stained glass studio, they have this shop and that shop, there's so many different arts and crafts. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, I have an interest that I've given up. Let me do some theater programs for the devotees. So starting in around 1979, I began developing different dramas, Krishna conscious dramas for the residents of New Vrindavan and for the guests of New Vrindavan. One devotee that joined me from New York City, Lokamangala, we performed together for many years, but later on he moved on. But we heard that there was going to be a drama competition, an Indian drama competition by some professors in New York City that were professors at Columbia University. Did I say college? It's Columbia University. And so we heard about this. And so we submitted. We entered the contest. And I think there was about 7 or 8 different entries. And we performed a scene. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a chapter in the first canto. You may be familiar. It's called The Pandavas Retire Timely. So it's all about Arjuna and Yudhisthira. Yudhisthira has heard that there's some problems going on in Dwarka. And so Arjuna, he travels to Dwarka to find out what's going on. In the meantime, Yudhisthira is impatiently waiting for Arjuna's return. And all the while, he's seeing some strange symptoms. The symptoms that the Kali Yuga is setting in to the whole social atmosphere. He sees that people are arguing with each other. They're cheating each other. He sees the seasons are no longer have a regular prescribed course. The seasonal activities are helter-skelter. The dogs, they're barking at him, and the deities are crying in the temple. The crows and the eagles, they're swooping down upon him, threatening him. And so he's knowing something is wrong. Something is seriously wrong, and he's eagerly waiting Arjuna's return from Dwarka. And then when Arjuna returns, lo and behold, he drops the bad news that Lord Krishna has left the planet, and all the residents of Dwarka, the men, they have had a huge fight. They practically killed each other off, and Dwarka itself was swept away by the ocean. And so now the Pandavas, they decide, this is the retirement. They decide, what's the value of ruling anymore? And so this is the moment when they retire into the forest. And so Lokamangala and myself and one other devotee, we performed we had 3 actors doing this one scene for about 20 minutes, this whole enactment of the Pandavas Retire Timely. And amazingly enough, we won first place at that drama competition at Columbia University in New York City. And then several years later in 1980, this was I think in 1981, but in 1986 and 87, I heard another extraordinary thing, that there was an international director. His name was Peter Brook. He was a famous director. He had a studio in Paris where he trained actors from all over the world that came to him. And together with an international cast of about 40 actors, they decided to perform the Mahabharata. But the Mahabharata is such a long story that it took them, their performance lasted for 9 hours. And then they started traveling around the world. And I heard that in the fall of 1987, they would be coming to New York City. So Lokamangala and I, we already did one scene of the Mahabharata, the Pandavas retire timely, and we've done a couple of other scenes, and we decided to write a fuller script, a full-length drama, about an hour and 40 minutes. And at that time, we invited other actors to join us, but nobody wanted to put in the time. We rehearsed probably for 4 months. And then we went to New York several months ahead, and we rented a theater in Midtown Manhattan called the American Theater of Actors. We didn't have that much money. We rented it for 6 weeks. And we were running at the same time, our show was running at the same time Peter Brook came to New York, and his show ran for 3 months. Ours only for 6 weeks. We didn't have a sufficient amount of money to rent the theater. I think it was costing us $1,000 a week in those days, very costly. That was like over 30 years ago in 1987. And so we performed there in New York City. The New York Times, they did an article on us. They referred to us as the other Mahabharata. Peter Brooks, of course, he's an international famous director. People were coming to see our Mahabharata. And eventually, after the 6 weeks, then we started taking our drama around to different temples, to also not only devotee temples, but Hindu temples. We went to colleges. We were invited to perform. And so we performed together for almost 4 years, just doing our Mahabharata drama. And wherever we went, people, some of the devotees knew my background in theater and in filmmaking. And they were saying, oh, you should do a film of the Mahabharata. But, I really was not so much inclined. It's too technical, too costly, very expensive to do a full-length drama. And so at that time, actually, a few years later, unfortunately, Lokamangala passed away. He passed away I think he was around 50 years old. And so I continued the Mahabharata myself. I did a solo drama of Mahabharata that I performed here and there. Because now I was actually getting more into storytelling because I also, Lokamangala passed away, and in the early 1990s, I suffered a heart attack. And so I had to shift my total focus. To do full-length dramas it was too much. And I've started focusing on doing dramatic storytelling programs. And I put together the Mahabharata just as a storytelling program. And I was making a profession out of my programs. I did storytelling from around the world. I went to colleges and schools and libraries and museums, sharing stories from Africa and from Russia and from Native American stories from the United States, and also a few stories from the Mahabharata, the story of the Yudhisthira and the dog and the Pandavas. And so anyways, I always wanted to do something bigger with the Mahabharata, but I couldn't do a film. But I thought, if I can't do a film, then let me do a book that if I were to envision what the Mahabharata would look like as a movie, let me just write that and make a very dramatic story of the Mahabharata and put it into a book. So that's my, I've written several books. That's one of my books. This is the Mahabharata, the Eternal Quest, it's called. That's my subtitle. And then I've written also Hanuman's Quest. That's all about Hanuman. But anyways, my subtitle my title is Mahabharata, and my subtitle is The Eternal Quest. And so sometimes people ask, what does that mean, the eternal quest? And I explain that actually here in the material world, there are two eternal quests going on. One eternal quest is a desire to accumulate riches and wealth and material satisfaction and material power. That's always going on in the material world. And the other eternal quest is our quest to revive our loving relationship with God, with Krishna. And so these two eternal quests are epitomized. They're represented in the Mahabharata, but the quest to serve God, to serve Krishna, is epitomized by the Yudhisthira and the Pandavas. And the quest for material power and wealth is epitomized by Duryodhana and his 99 brothers. And so that the Mahabharata is this constant kind of conflict between the material resources and the spiritual resources that are available in the material world. And so there's this constant conflict. And one of the main focuses that I have in my book is on the nature of leadership, because in the West and all over the world, there's a leadership vacuum. People don't know what real leadership means. What is a real leader supposed to be like? And there's many, many examples of the qualities of a leader and the dynamics, the intentions of a leader, a true leader. Nowadays, we have so many kind of like fake leaders. In the Kali Yuga, there's so many pretenders. But the Mahabharata gives us an example of what a true leader, what they, how they act, and what they're supposed to be like. So, the thing is this, that Prabhupada, he wanted to establish a Brahminical community because society needed a head. And he, at the end of his life, he wanted the devotees to establish the next installment to establish the Varnashram system. And so one of the things that are important is we need to educate people in society as what does it mean to be a true leader. Just as Prabhupada educated devotees what it means to be a Brahmin, actually the Vaishnava teachings and the Vaishnava devotees are even, Prabhupada explains, they're greater than the Brahmins. But now the Vaishnavas, the Brahmins, they have to educate the rest of society how to live in an orderly fashion and how to educate people on how to be real leaders, because there are leaders in the politics, there are leaders in business, there's all sorts of leadership, leaders of families, leaders of entertainment. So these leaders need to be educated as to, and not only educated, but inspired. So many devotees are going around here and there, inspiring the leadership. They're talking to the different people in different industries and different business ventures. There are people, devotees talking to politicians. We need to make a bigger impact. And so in this way, Prabhupada created the Brahminical culture. Now we have to create a culture of honorable leaders and design the rest of the Vedic culture, this Varnashram system, which Prabhupada so badly wanted us to do at the end of his life. But I don't know, let's see. We have a few minutes left, I think. But are there any comments or questions? Be happy to entertain some comments.
So just one question, Prabhu.
Sure, go right
Is it
ahead.
that Detroit's visit is the first one, like you met Srila Prabhupada?
In Detroit, yes, in
Detroit.
1971.
And when it was you got initiated?
I got initiated in Chicago at the end of 1973. So in 71, we moved to Madison, Wisconsin, and we were there for several years. We joined in the summer of 1973 in Chicago, and by the end of the year, we were initiated, and Prabhupada gave me the name Sankirtana Das, and my wife, her name is Ruchi Devi Dasi. And then we spent 3 years in Chicago.
Very nice.
Thank you. We spent 3 years in Chicago, and then we decided to move here to New Vrindavan in 1976.
Tell them what was happening in New Vrindavan when you
Yeah, it was very unusual.
arrived.
My wife was talking about it the other day. We came here, actually, we wanted to come at an auspicious time because New Vrindavan was a very austere place in the old days. And so we heard from the devotees that when you do something for Gorpunim, if you start something on Gorpunim, it will fructify in success. So we thought, okay, let's come to New Vrindavan. We'll come there on the eve of Gorpunim. And as we were sending our luggage in advance on the bus, I heard on the radio that there was New Vrindavan was quarantined. There was a hepatitis epidemic in New Vrindavan, and the state of West Virginia closed down New Vrindavan. No one could go in, no one could go out. They were quarantined. And so that didn't discourage us. We came anyways. And, you know, if you come to New Vrindavan, most people come the front way, which we call on 250.
Right.
And there are police cars guarding the path. Anyone tries to get in onto the New Vrindavan road, there's police cars standing there day and night. But there's a back way. In those days, it was an old country dirt road, very winding, much more winding than the usual roads here in West Virginia. And so when we arrived at the airport, one devotee, his name is Bhokta, he passed away a few years ago. He's a wonderful devotee here in New Vrindavan. And he picked us up and he waited. We waited in the car until around 10 or 11 o'clock when it was in the dead of night. And then he started driving up.
In dark.
Up the road in total darkness. And we were yeah, go ahead, Malati.
No, I'm just like enhancing, like no streetlights. It was
Yeah, it was total darkness. And so we are chanting japa in the car, and the road is winding and we're curving up higher and higher into the mountains. And as we're getting closer to New Vrindavan, we feel this wave of spiritual energy that is coming at us, and our senses, our bodies are tingling because of this. We're entering into this spiritual atmosphere of New Vrindavan. So we arrived there, And then we stayed in a house for a couple of days, and there was several other families staying in the house as well. But a few days later, they gave us our own house. But the thing about our own house, the house that gave us, actually there were 4 or 5 these houses. They were called Prabhupada houses. I think they were named after Prabhupada because he made a little sketch and he designed a little house, a simple little house. There was no electricity, no running water, no bathrooms. And there was a wood burning stove that kept us warm. But there was an outhouse across the field. And to fetch water, we had to go to a nearby little cabin that was the temple. And so this was the beginning of our stay here in New Vrindavan, that we were living in very austere conditions. We had 2 children. And so at that time, my wife, she started to, in the Chicago temple, she became very expert in working with Srimati Tulsi Devi. And they also asked her to do that service here in New Vrindavan. And they asked me to cook the oat water and rice every morning. That's a famous preparation that the devotees used to have in the morning. And no, it was like all over the movement, people heard, what, they're eating oat water and rice? You know, the way they found out about oat water is that there were some prisons in the South who they didn't make oatmeal. When you eat oatmeal, it will make you tired. And then people want to take a nap because it's very heavy on the digestive system. But the oat water in the prison, they were making oat water for the prisoners. It's giving them enough energy and they can go out. So it wasn't exactly oatmeal, but it was like a drink. And we had oat water and rice, and the devotees went out. But there was a secret. People were afraid to come to New Vrindavan because they were thinking, all I'm going to get is oat water and rice in the morning. I don't think I can handle that. But there was a secret. At New Vrindavan here, they saved every ounce of Mahaprasadam that came off the altar. They locked it away in the closet. They put a lock on the closet. Sometimes devotees would try to pry open the doors of the closet and stick their hands up and try to grab a few pieces of Mahaprasadam. And so what they did is they even put nails into the cabinet. So if somebody tried to reach some Mahaprasadam, they would scrape their hands. And so every ounce of Mahaprasadam was saved. And when you came to the morning program, at Mangalarti was around 4 o'clock in those days. If you didn't come to Mangalarti, you wouldn't get any Maha. But whoever came to Mangalarti in the morning program, then they would put down their plates, and a few of the ladies, they would serve out huge amounts of Mahaprasadam. Everyone got about 5 or 6 very delicious pieces of Mahaprasadam. And so that was our secret here in New Vrindavan, that, not only were we having oat water and rice, but what other temple is giving, is making such an effort to keep the Mahaprasadam and serve it out to the devotees every morning. And so that's what was going on here in New Vrindavan. Malati, you have a thought on that?
There was another Mahaprasadam story.
Yeah.
Everything that you said, but there would be a picture of an unmarried brahmacharini. Of course, brahmacharinis are not married. And whoever broke the door and tried to get in the Maha would have to marry that girl. She wasn't already married.
What, they used to have a picture in the cabinet, right?
Yeah.
All right.
That's how Garga Rishi got married.
Oh, okay. And one devotee even wrote a series of articles called The Prasadam Addict.
Oh, that is
that
so.
he was addicted to prasadam. And so people, some of the brahmacharis, they were conniving how to steal the Mahaprasadam. And so, so there were tricks on stealing it, and then there were also tricks on saving it. So this
This
is
book,
going on.
The Prasadam Addict, you can Google it. It is available on PDF form online, and I think also in some kind of, what was that? The little something on our New Vrindavan, one of the New Vrindavan sites. What was
It's
the
called
name?
Brijabasi Spirit, I
Yeah.
think. Isn't it on
Brijabasi
Brijabasi Spirit?
It's there. It is just a beautiful piece of literature, which will have tears coming down your eyes. I mean, it is so beautifully written, and it's so
It's very humorous.
Yeah, humorous.
Those tears are tears of laughter. It's so funny. But you may want to Google that.
Yeah.
And you're also welcome to Google my page. It tells you more about my work, Mahabharat Project. You can Google that. The website address is Mahabharat with the A at the end, -project.com.
Okay,
And
sure.
so there's a lot of relishable things to talk about in New Vrindavan. Do you have any other thoughts on that, Malati?
Well, now it's 7:30, so we probably have to schedule another time.
Okay, talk about Prasadam. Anyways, it's my great pleasure to be with the devotees. Thank you so much for joining me.
So much.
And Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's very inspiring.
His Grace
Hare
Sankirtana
Krishna.
Prabhu ki jai. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you so much. It was very nectarian, and we get to know a lot of things today.
Yeah, I
Hopefully this
visited
session will continue.
your home long back, probably in 2004, when His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj took us to a journey of New Vrindavan. It's up top of the hill, small hill. You
Yes,
told the
Old
story.
Vrindavan Farm.
Yes,
If you're planning to come to New Vrindavan, please don't hesitate to contact me.
definitely.
I'm happy to meet with you.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Jai Radhe.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Malati Prabhu, for joining.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.